Okay, good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are, whatever time you're listening to this episode. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Design Podcast. My name is Ini Abiodun, and with me, I've got Emmanuel.
Hi guys, I am happy to be here again to have another dazzling discussion about growth design and its insight and everything. So
All right, so with us today, we have a very amazing guest that I am excited to introduce to you. His name is Shawn Gong. He's a product advisor and head of product growth. Hi, Shawn. He has a background in product management and has 12 years of experience leading cross functional teams. And he's launched several award winning products globally. Now, he spearheaded international expansion for Grindr, which is the largest social networking app for LGBTQ community. He also orchestrated Goat's expansion into China, the largest marketplace for authentic sneakers. In addition to this, his team pioneered augmented reality mobile apps at Dakri, which was then acquired by Snap. Currently, is advising startups to unlock their growth potentials. As if all of this is not enough, he also lectures at the University of California in Los Angeles and Loyola Marymount University. Now, outside of work, Shawn is still an adventurous soul. He is conquering mountains, literally, and exploring the world through skiing, surfing, and even horseback riding. Talk about doing it all. So glad to have you here with us, Shawn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so as a product leader, we just want to get to know you better and find out, how did you get started in product management?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because, like product management, it's not like typical career like someone you study computer science and then you become like software engineer, or you study design and become a designer. There is, I think maybe there is now, but like a decade ago, there was no major for product management. So for me, I actually studied computer science and then engineering management. And then I honestly didn't know what exactly I wanted to do besides becoming a software developer. So I started my job as a consultant at Deloitte. I enjoyed quite a bit, but later I got really fascinated by the startup scene. I think it's just fascinating to work at a really fast-paced place to solve a problem and then to create value for the customers and then also generate revenue for the business. So I just looked into like different kind of startups and then came upon this one, Dakri. At that time was developing augmented reality, and then I look at some demos and it just blew my mind. It's like, wow, that's so cool. It's like beyond the typical like dimensions you can see the experience. So really fascinating, really draw a lot of attention to that. And then honestly at that time I didn't know what function I was the right fit for me. I actually literally like read all of these job description for everything, like marketing, design, and then sales, customer service, and then eventually I found out about product management. Oh wow, like sounds really cool. Like you can represent the users and then also get to work with engineers, designers, and to build a product, get your hands dirty, and at the same time with the goal, to help business succeed. So I think that just sounds the best for me. And to be honest, like I didn't get a product management job right away because I didn't have any experience. That was a struggle for a lot of people. And then so eventually I have convinced the startup to take me as a project manager, but under a product team. So I actually went to their conferences, I went to a lot of meetups, and then just volunteer to help them set up, organize. That's how I show my passion and the persistence, and then eventually convince them to take a chance on me.
That's really nice. I love that. So now you've gone from project manager to product manager eventually. What was your journey then into growth?
Honestly speaking, I got in from product management to product growth by accident. So when I was hired by Grindr, that time the 60% of the shares was purchased by a Chinese company. And then they wanted to bring someone who can be the liaison bridge, between the team in the US and the team in China. Because I grew up in China, and I also have experience in product management, so I think that's the right fit for them. But unfortunately, that didn't really happen. So I have to find a job for myself. So I did a lot of research and then look for insight to figure out what the opportunities were And then eventually came to two areas. One is subscription business, and then second one is global expansion. For the audience who are not familiar with Grindr, so the business revenue comes from two areas. One is ads from free users, and then the other one is from the paid customers through subscriptions. So I found the opportunity in subscriptions and then just led a team working on subscriptions. And then of course, as the name sounds, it's subscription, it's basically generate revenue for the business. So naturally, basically that evolved to growth role by accident. But I love it because, I think it's a little different from typical product management, but I love having a very clear business outcome, the goal you want to have, and then to work on those areas.
So yeah, that's really good. Now, just for our audience, right? What is the difference then between what a product manager does and what a growth-focused product manager does? And how can designers begin to think about what that relationship looks like, especially for growth designers?
Yeah, I think maybe we can take one step back to give you a little bit context in terms of how we think about the types of product work. And then, so from very high level, we can say there is pre-product market fit, and then it's after product market fit. So the two big areas. So under pre-product market fit, that's usually referred to early age startups. They discover a problem, and then they're working on the solution, and then they're trying to acquire more customers, and then retain them, and then maybe not necessarily generate revenue. Because you can see for a lot of the stuff, even for the big ones, Gong IPO, they still necessarily generate enough revenue right away. So for that stage, you focus how can we find out the product market fit to validate all the assumptions we have made, risk we have taken. And then so that very different type of work. I think for a lot of the majority probably the product management are in the after product market fit area. And then after this area, you can say there is probably 4 sub areas. The first one is future strategy. The second one is growth strategy. The third one is expansion strategy. The fourth one is scaling. So for future strategy, it's all about enhance the product. So it can be enhance existing features or develop new features. That's, I think, most of the product managers and designers work on. And the second one is growth. It's about maximizing the value. So typically 3 areas: acquisition, retention, and the monetization. And the third one is expansion. That's why I did, for the global expansion. So so now we already found product market fit in this area, region, and the market. How can we expand it to maybe more use cases, more users, or different regions, kind of things. And the fourth one, scaling, is enabling. That's usually for technical product managers. So the scaling in terms the process, the tech, and the users. So to answer your question, the bigger difference, I think typical product team, they just work on improving existing features and develop new features. But for the growth team, we focus on those business metrics to improve acquisition, retention, and monetization.
Yeah, which then brings us to our main focus for this conversation, which is monetization. So how would you define monetization?
I think monetization is for business to capture values from the users. And then it's exchange. We deliver product and the service to you, and then exchange with your payment, for our product service. Yes.
Looking at monetization in general, what are the common models that exist, and how do companies then decide which model fits them?
Yeah, in terms of the monetization models, it really depends on your users and your business. One mistake happens a lot for a lot of companies is they want to follow the trend. For example, oh my God, subscription is so hot. Let's just use subscription. Basically the problem is you have to think about for your users how frequently and naturally when they use your product, and then that can think about how often should we charge users. So give you example. Let's say for Netflix, we expect a user to watch it at least a few times a week, and then they will continue month after month. So in that case, monthly subscription makes sense. So you charge them a month and then they get to watch the whole month. So they don't have to think about it. But there is other products enterprise ones, Salesforce. And then for this one, because it's a huge product and then they're gonna solve a lot of problems using by many team members, and then usually cost a lot of money. And then for those products, usually they will have a 1-year contract. So only renew yearly, and the price might change based on what kind of the particular product add-on you want to have. But at the same time, there is also products like Instagram. You don't pay to use the product, and they generate revenue through ads. And then also there are products charge you by transaction, because that's a natural, like, you only need to pay when you have a transaction. For example, some e-commerce, right? So they're not going to charge you a subscription. So to answer your question, so I think it really depends on the nature of the business, and also the nature of how frequent the users use your product, and then it's reasonable time for them to pay.
Just leading off of that, what mistakes have you then seen, observed that many companies end up making with monetization? And for you, in your experience, how have you been able to just figure out how to cater to varied audiences, and what monetization strategy would actually work better for them?
Yeah, there is many mistakes I have seen. I mean, I even made by myself. My primary focus is B2C, but so we can maybe touch about B2B quickly, and then we can shift to B2C. So for B2B, you probably have heard it too. I think a lot of mistake is like a couple of things. One is the typical monetization strategy are handled by or given to the sales team. So they are the ones, the companies hire them to chase the potential customers and then get the contract signed, and then to meet the financial goals for the company. And then also marketing also have given for that to create awareness and convert customers. So the product team hasn't been really tapping into the monetization that much until recent years. So I think that's like a one mistake, but good thing is like the trend is changing. And so a lot of product teams have been focused on monetization. Particularly, you heard about this very hot term is like product-led, right? So product-led, in terms like your product can sell by itself without a sales team necessarily, and then can be different ways. Can be this, users can just discover your product and then try it by itself and then pay them by themselves. Or can be just use it for a certain stage and then get enough signals, and then they can tell the sales team, hey, looks like this user might be able to convert, check it out. So that's for B2B. Basically, the mistake earlier is just only didn't use the product team to focus on monetizations. And then for the B2C side, there is not that many product focused on monetization yet. But I think also the good thing is changing. I think a lot of the times like mistake I haven't seen even for a lot of my customers. They would simply ask me like, oh, should we increase the price? Should we decrease the price? And then should we like change some features? Should we remove some features? Should we create more ads? And then they think that's the strategy. And then I often tell them I cannot just answer this question, because we have to look at so many things as a whole to understand the strategy. Strategy basically means like what we should focus on, what we shouldn't, rather than answer the question, should we increase the price or not? Because there's a lot of elements play into that. So yeah, that's like, I think for B2C, one of the biggest mistakes is like people think monetization is just changing prices.
Amazing. One of the things I noticed most when you talked about these mistakes that companies do make when making these monetization strategies, I see you talk much about customers, and it did make sense because, monetization is just you exchange value for your customers' money, right? So in view of this, when building your monetization strategy, how does that affect the way you build your strategy in terms of the needs of your customer or your customer segmentation?
Yes. Yeah, I would say in terms of strategy-wise, one of the first things you want to do is to really understand your customers. It's all from there, right? Because, we talk about monetization, it's all about the user feel they get enough value and then it's reasonable to pay you for this service or product you provide. So that, of course, which means like when a company starts a monetization strategy, you have to start with the users to think about their views. So in that case, one way to look at it is to think about 4 elements. It's like scale and the what and the amount and the when, to understand them. So in terms like scale is like in terms like how much you should pay, and then how does it scale? In terms like, do I use more, you charge me more, or how does the value, change based on what I receive from you, and then my payment will go. So, and then another one is look at is like how much you charge me, what's reasonable, and how frequent you should charge me. So there's 4 elements. So I can give you some examples. A grinder. So I grinder a couple of things based on the user view. We found there's problem to be fixed. One is, even though we had a user from over almost like 200 countries, like everywhere in the world, but we charge them the same price. I mean, obviously that's wrong, right? Because like $20 in the US might be very different from some less developed regions, and then so that's just wrong.
Yeah.
And then so that just didn't obviously resonate with the users. That much money is worth it, right? And then so that's one thing. And the second one is we didn't offer free trials. What I mean by that is if you come to our product, as a first-time user, and you stay as a free user, which means you don't ever get to experience our paid features. How would you know the value? And then who's gonna take a risk like, I'm gonna pay $20, just try it, right? So most people are like, no, I don't know if it's good or not. So free trial, that's another way to think about from user perspective too. It's like, okay, let me give you the best experience, particularly for the first-time users. You want to offer them the best experience you can so they can understand, because that time they're still evaluating your product among competition. They say, okay, basically for user journey, it's like they learn from marketing, your promotions to like, okay, that's your promise to me, the things you can do for me. So I'm going to evaluate to try if we fulfill your promises. And then so that's why they evaluate. So when you don't give them a free try, they don't get to experience that part, and then of course they might not like experience. Particularly early stage, we had a lot of ads, and the user really hated it because users like, oh my god, it's like too many. That's why we offer free trial, and then that really significantly drove the conversion. Obviously, because the user has a good taste of the product and then the pay features, so they are very happy to continue. The third example at Grindr is like a lot of dating apps, we had too many paywalls. So imagine as a first-time user or even just like returned free user, and then whenever the pay feature you attempt to use, all you see is just a paywall, and it's like very frustrating, right? Because basically you feel like gateway, like you cannot go there, cannot do this, cannot do this. It's like too many limitations. So so a few changes we have made. One is certain features we think that didn't convert that well, or maybe it's not the most compelling pay feature for user to convert. Let's give them for free. So have the better experience. Not mention particularly a product like dating app. Networking fact is so critical. That's why I make Grindr staying as the largest app for the community, because you have the most users. The dating app, of course, is different from like other apps. Like a social app too. You want like Instagram, why so popular? Because you have the most users there, right? So the dating pool is very important for them. And another thing we made is we, instead of listing all the features, that's a mistake you have seen probably for a lot of products. They like list all the features to you, but to be honest, like a user is not going to read through all of them. Each only need to tell them why it's important, and then make it more attractive. So not just like all the text, like no one gonna read it. Particularly users have developed a habit, they will see paywall and then they will just immediately dismiss it, rather than to really convince them the value. So that's another mistake. A lot of changes we have made. We changed the copy, we changed the image, and particularly one thing we discovered works the best is to not necessarily have your copywriter marketing team to write fancy language about describing your product and sell them the feature. Instead, ask your users, how do they describe your pay features using that word, because that resonates with them the most. So that's another important lesson I've learned, and then the changes we make accordingly.
Yeah, all the things that you've talked about definitely reminds me of the point you made where it's like you can't treat monetization as an island, because you have to just think about it as a whole. Every department or every area of the business needs to come together to figure out what that strategy is.
I think I have a very interesting question based on what you just said now to Shawn. I would say, who should lead or should be involved in pricing or monetization discussion in a company or in an org?
Yeah, I think for the B2C, I think definitely should be the product team, and then the finance, and then maybe marketing too. The reason for finance is because you have to do a lot of create some modeling to predict, let's say if I increase this price or lower this price or have different tiers, and then what the revenue might look like. and then how many free users I'm gonna have, how many paid users I'm gonna have, and then how long they might return, how often I'm gonna renew, and then eventually figure out the LTV, like
lifetime
lifetime value of the users, right? That conversation will require marketing team, because marketing team has a budget in terms of how much they spend to acquire users, and then you have to understand the LTV. So is it worth it in return, and how often do you get paid back? That's why for a lot of business, they were successful because they were able to acquire users and return them faster, and then so they can beat their competitions in the new space. So that's why it's important to have marketing, finance, and the product in the conversation. So for B2B, and then you will add the sales team to this discussion.
What are the different scenarios that prompt a pricing change that you've seen? Are there examples where you've tried out a certain pricing strategy and realized very quickly, oh my goodness, that's not the right way to go, we might need to rethink this? And then what did you do?
Yeah, I think there is two ways to look at. One is, that's actually a mistake too. So a lot of companies, they set up a monetization strategy and then try it, and then that's it. They don't look at it for like a long period of time. So I think for monetization strategy, you probably should review at least maybe twice a year, just as a regular thing to do to evaluate the strategy. Because not mentioning like you constantly acquire new users, and then their behavior might be different. And then so the metrics might be different in terms of like the renewal rate and the retention rate. So you have to think about too. Now, another thing to look at is like for acquisition, because I have clients, turns out they acquire the wrong customers. So the wrong segment. So in that case, of course, the conversion and retention very low. And then as a result, the monetization dropped, or because you spend money on acquiring the wrong customer, and then they come to your product, realize, that's not for me, I'm gonna leave. So one thing is that you wanted to review regularly. Second thing is just focus on the metrics. That's probably we're gonna do daily. And then of course, for those monetization things, you cannot make decisions just by the changes daily. So that's usually based on how frequent you charge your customers. And then like I mentioned, right, so it's like monthly, is it by transactions, or yearly, and then so you can revisit them, this metric, to compare, to say like what they changed from the last year, or last year at the same time, in this quarter or month, and you see what the changes have found. So if you see some signals that say, oh, the conversion rate has dropped, the renewal rate have dropped, so then that can really prompt you to think about, okay, do I need to adjust any strategies for this problem?
Are you able to share any in-depth experiment around monetization that you've seen? And I'm wondering if you can give us like a failed experiment, first of all, and then a couple of experiments that you conducted that were successful.
Yeah, one experiment I remember at Grindr was, at that time, Apple just released a new tier. So which is like you can not just charge users by weekly, monthly, or quarterly, or yearly. You can charge them just by a few days, with very short period of time. And then so I had a hypothesis that maybe for some users who don't have the intention to subscribe, but when they, let's say, go to certain big gatherings, let's go to some like festivals, and then they're going to be a lot of users, they may want to use a product more often, more heavily. And then so my hypothesis is like maybe we can sell this product to them. So we create a new SKU for the subscription. But as a result, it turns out it didn't really sell that well. So so just did not work. So that's very different from my hypothesis. The lesson learned is like, yes, you may have some sound hypothesis, but you definitely need to validate with the user and then test it out. And particularly if it's a very risky, require a lot of effort to develop those things, you probably want even to test out before you really develop and release the product.
How does data really play that role in terms of shaping your monetization strategy compared to the users? Like, how do you match these two together?
Data, that's definitely the first thing I would look into it. Like I mentioned, right? So for the monetization, you wanted to understand what the conversion rate, from a pay to subscribe, of customers, and then renewal rate, and then also how many cycles do we renew, because they can give you a lot of signals to answer all the questions. For example, the conversion, if the conversion rate is low, and then that maybe suggests that maybe the price not reasonable to the users, and then also the data to be more specific, like I mentioned, like for global expansion, you have to look at different regions, right? Because the conversion rate, if you just look at whole, that'll give you a wrong idea. And also you want to look at different cohort too. That can make a difference.
Yeah.
Maybe because the marketing have some campaigns have done, and then or maybe there are some changes of your product. So each cohort, the conversion rate may be different. If it's dramatically different, you wanted to investigate like what happened. What make it so well or what make it so poorly? At Grindr, we offer different plans too. You have to look at like which plan sells the best and which one the least performing one. And then that makes you think about, okay, do we need to adjust? Let's say 1 month is the most popular one. Well, then we should maybe help the user make decision easier as a designer too, right? Because you create a barrier, particularly when you show full plans. And user be like, there's too many calculation for me to do. I don't know which one to pick. What's gonna happen? I'm not gonna subscribe, right? Because that's how brain works. We take shortcuts. It's too complicated. We're not gonna make decision. So you have to think about that. How can we help them? That's why maybe 1 month the most popular one. We recommend it for you, so you take this offer. So there's a lot of things to talk about that. Another example I wanted to give is when I was at Gold, and then I would start thinking about which country which country tier we should go for the global expansion, right? Because the whole world is so many. Should I go to Italy? Should I go to Saudi Arabia? Should I like expand it to Mexico? And then so I started with let me look at GDP, and then maybe GDP per person, and then so that can give me an idea. It's like the purchase power of this country. And then I start with that route, but later, luckily, I start looking into like the existing behavior. We have the data. So for example, Saudi Arabia, when I did this GDP, per capita things, they didn't come as a top tier for me. But when I look at the existing customers for the purchase from this country, and that just blew my mind. I was so surprised because they actually have the highest value per transaction. So they bought the most expensive sneakers and they spend most money, and they usually even bought 2 or 3 pairs rather than the average 1 pair for the US. So that can give me an idea. It's like, oh my God, I cannot just look at a country as a whole. I have to particularly look at this niche market for our ideal customers. How much do they spend? What the behavior? And then that give me a different picture. That makes me think, oh my God, the purchase power is much higher for this country, particularly for our product, from our users. So that should be my focus, to make the experience better, so to convert better, generate more revenue for the business.
Amazing, yeah. Because you just actually answered the next question I was going to dive into, like you giving us like a success story where data kind of played like a key role in refining your strategy, which you mentioned about how you dug into the specific GDPR data for some of those countries, and it helped you in kind of knowing how you sort of built that strategy for Goat, which is amazing. I know you're a lecturer and an advisor, so what are the techniques that you've used in your experience to balance your strategies, your approach in monetization, to ensure that you get the best in terms of user experience your customers are getting when it comes to them converting?
I love this question because in the product world, I'm sure you guys know that as a product designer too, constantly we have to make decisions about trade-offs, right? And then for designer particularly, you represent the users, you want to offer the best user experience. But same time, for the product managers also, we have those business goals, if you talk about monetization. So that always, there is like a balance we have to make, because we have seen a lot of mistake the companies make is that they should focus on the short-term monetization goals. Yes, you generate revenue significantly and increase, but you sacrifice the user experience. And then as a result, you will start seeing the retention will drop. And then eventually the user is going to leave your products, and then your monetization, of course, is going to suffer. So always a balance. So usually a lot of things to think. I think one thing particularly important is I think about the frictions. I've seen a lot of products, like I mentioned, either have too many paywalls, or they just create a lot of barriers for user to make decision to buy product, or they try too hard, to bump user with all kind of upgrade. So that just too annoying for the users. So I think you really have to understand the balance, like when is the right time to ask the users to pay. So this is about reduce frictions. So one example I can give is at Grindr. So for our Android users, initially we actually use Stripe for them to make a payment, and then later we switch to Google in-app billing. So that rate, as a cut, it was quite large for us. So I think it's around like Stripe, I think, charge us around 3% of the transaction, and then Google charge us 30%. So that was a very hard decision to make. But eventually we came to we wanted to provide a better experience for users to reduce frictions, because when you go to Stripe, they require user to enter at that time, public experience change, to enter a credit card and all the things. So it's much harder, particularly let's say you don't have your credit card on file or things happen, and then you're just not going to convert. And then Googling and billing, it's very easy, one click and then you're done. So, and then not mention, for users, after you experience the good things, particularly at the standard, your expectation will increase. So at that time, gradually you can see the user have already used to just through using in-app payment. And so they don't want to grab the credit card to pay again. So the expectation has changed too. So we have to our product has to evolve to meet the increased expectation from the customer. And then by providing the best experience you can, and then obviously they will be more willing to pay you for your service and the product.
It's really interesting. So I guess my question now comes for designers, because you mentioned it's always a balancing game, like you've referred to, right? So at what point, from your perspective as a PM, I can see how your priority would be, how do we make sure the business goals are met? And then potentially from a designer's perspective, it's like, oh no, but we have to consider the user's perspective also, and making sure that they are fine with the experience. So what would your recommendation be for a designer as regards a thought process when you're having to balance the business goals with the user experience?
So I think a few things I would do. Basically, the first thing I want to understand is the risk. So I will understand from the business perspective and the user experience perspective. So for the business perspective, so I will want to understand, okay, what is the target of the revenue, and then how soon do we need to hit it? If we don't hit it, what's going to happen? And at the same time, to understand from the designers, so if we proceed this way, what's going to happen? What do we foresee? So let's say how many users are going to lose, and then retention, what's going to change. And then based on some predictions and calculations, I can probably bring back to the business and say, hey, yes, maybe short term we can hit the revenue, but long term that's gonna suffer. And then once you lose a customer, it's very difficult to get them back. So that's very important. And at the same time, it's not that easy, because with the more details, I also will talk to designer to see, hey, okay, maybe we cannot do the perfect version you want, but let's kind of evaluate some alternatives. So maybe we can deliver the best experience, but what is the third version, fourth version, and then we can to see if they can reduce the risk. And then another way to do it is on top of that is, can we release to a small amount of users? That can be a beta users, and then to see if that really validate the risk from the design. But usually I definitely lean a lot to the designers and then really trust their intuitions, and then because I've seen a lot of businesses make mistakes like that. So probably have heard recently Unity made a dramatic change about their monetization strategy and the pricing, and then that really caused a lot of backlash from the customers. And then to a degree, the customers, mostly gaming developers, they were so angry. They post on social media and they refuse to use the product, and they will switch. And then so that even if they decide to make a change, that'd be very difficult to gain back the reputation, because they lost the loyalty and the trust from the customers. So that's why that part, I think, usually resonates very well with designers. Is yes, we have the business goal, but we have to always maintain the trust from the users. Once you lose it, it's very difficult to reestablish that.
Yeah, amazing. I like how you ended that, ensuring you keep tab with the trust, because in essence, you could get the conversion, you could get them to pay, but will you be able to retain? And because when the trust gets broken, retention start to drop and there's no return buyer, which eventually we still hurt that metrics or that revenue goal that you were trying to fight for when you are trying to bait in. So how do you increase the perceived value of your product so that you could really lower the barrier of having drop off during conversion so that you could have a successful monetization at the end of the day?
Yeah, I love this question. Particularly, it's very relevant to the last question. We just talked about building and maintaining trust. And then that your perceived value will go up. Let's take Louis Vuitton, because everyone knows this luxury brand, right? No, they charge, let's say, $10,000 for a purse. But you really think that's the actual cost? No, right? No. Same thing for iPhone. It's really gonna cost $1,000 to make? No. But the perceived value is so high, right? Think about these two brands, particularly for Louis Vuitton, because they have loyal customers. They love the brand. And the brand have established the ways like when you carry this, people know, this is a very high quality product. And then they also associate with luxury and then fits into this very important part of the human, like this tribe. You belong to this rich, high, great taste, this tribe. So you think it's worth that money because I can join this club. Similar to like Equinox, the gym, right? It's why so different from like 24/7, those like very affordable gym. It's because that's a place you think it's like all the high income earners will be there. You associate with them, you are the same class with them. So that's all about that. Let me give you an example. So at Goat, we sell this authentic sneakers. Actually give you a little bit of background. So the company was created because the founder, they bought sneakers from eBay. And unfortunately, they were fake. So that's why he was very angry. And then at that time, he was looking for like authentic sneakers, and it was difficult to find. And so he created this company. So he trained his employees to specialize in terms like validating authenticated sneakers. And then so they established that. So two things I think that made this company very successful. One is they increase the perceived value by ensuring the product you buy are absolutely authentic. That's a trust, right? And then the perceived value. So customers, they might say, oh, there is cheaper sneakers on eBay, but I'm not sure, right? Like I trust your brand, and then so I'm gonna willing to spend more money to get this pair of shoes from you. So that's why, right? The second thing to make it very successful is they tell stories. This is not just a plain pair of sneakers. This is, from let's say Michael Jordan, or like the story behind that. So maybe this Michael Jordan, the first pair they wear to win the NBA game, or this is a very special designers, artists, making something. So it's a story. So you feel like you appreciate that story, the art behind that, and it make you feel like special. That's actually the name was created for GOAT. So GOAT, it's not just the animal goat. It stands for greater of all times, right?
Of all time, yeah.
So when you wear these sneakers, kind of like Nike, that kind of future, you feel like you're an athlete. You feel like you are elevated. So that perceived value has increased. That's why it's different from typical brand. So because it's not just a pair of shoes.
Amazing. Yeah.
I love it.
My next question is adapting to new trends. With your extensive experience in product management, how have you adapted monetization strategies in response to trend, like the rise in sharing economy, or maybe there's this subscription model that is kind of trending? So how do you kind of adapt your strategies to new trends?
Well, first of all, I would say don't just simply follow a trend. It's great to really follow a trend to understand, why it's gaining more popularity, and then receive good feedback and then be adapted by a lot of companies, and it's crazy. But at the same time, you have to think about maybe your business is different, and then that's why we talk about you have to think about from the user perspective. Does it make sense for them to follow this trend?
Yeah.
So I think a couple examples I can think of is one is LastPass. This product I use is to basically store all the username and the password for you in one place. So that's a really good problem to solve, right? Because how often do you I forgot my password if you go through the whole process. And also, or another problem you have is you use the same password. Maybe your name your birthday something for all the places. That's very, very bad. So, and then this product, they generate password for you. But I noticed one problem they had was they usually start with complete free. And then so they have tons of users. But I suspect they didn't think about the monetization strategy early enough. And later, they suddenly start charging people. To me, it's like, it's not that bad. You know, this product provides really good value for me. And I have done a lot of investment in terms of I have saved all the places in this place. I cannot just easily switch to a new platform. But however, I think because it's shock to a lot of users, many of my former colleagues, they decided to leave this product because they just couldn't take it. So to me, that's another lesson to learn. It's like, if you wanted to offer free and to acquire a lot of new customers, follow some trend, but you have to think about like, if it is the right sustainable approach, and then when you introduce a new price for all the customers, what's going to happen? Because I think to a lot of customers, like they feel like they have no option. They are forced to convert. They didn't have a choice. I think that just against about psychology behavior. It's like, you know, like no one wanted to be forced to do anything. I think that probably is a problem.
Yeah.
But if they start early, let's say they have a free trial, and then, or maybe they have a free premium. So like, you know, right? So you have a free version and you have a paid version. I think that would be a very different story. Probably a lot of users would be happy to stay where they are or they convert, rather than just leaving the platform. Another example I think is like the ClassPass. It's funny, this product I use, ClassPass and ClassPass. I'm not sure you have used it. Basically, it's like for you to visit different studios. But I don't like the way how they charge customers, because it's like every month you have to buy a certain number of credits.
The credits.
Yeah, and then you use a credit to go to different studios. But the problem for that it's different from typical like gym. For a gym, you can usually attend unlimited classes, and then you just pay monthly. So monthly subscription makes perfect sense in like Equinox, right? But for ClassPass, like each studio, each class charge you different number of credits, and then every month you might use different number of credits. So to me, it's really annoying. Every month I have to evaluate, like, should I pick this plan? Should I pick another plan? And oftentimes I don't get to use all my credit, or I don't have enough credit. So I just feel like that strategy, the pricing doesn't fit the user's needs correctly in terms like how often or how much they use for the class. So it's kind of like each time when you go to the studio, that's more like a transaction. So I think if I were them, I would basically, it's like you can buy a certain number of credits, and then you can pursue that rather than having a subscription.
Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons I left the platform, to be fair, because I felt like that payment method benefited the studios more than it helped or benefited users. Because then, especially when you end up at the end of a month, you now have 3 credits left. What am I supposed to do with 3 credits?
Exactly.
When an average class is like 30 or something, like it just
Another story actually on ClassPass I wanted to mention is like I have tried to refer a lot of friends to use ClassPass so we can go to take classes together. But I noticed like really one big problem is like many of them told me no. I'm like, and then I just follow up question is like, oh, so why? They said that, well, the ClassPass didn't allow me to take more than 3 classes from the same studio. I said, oh, and then I said like, oh, I never heard of that. So I look it up. Turns out that was a really old policy they had, but they already removed the changes, so you can take as many classes as you can. So I wanted to emphasize this story because it's very hard to change people's first impression or perception. So even I talked to so many people, that's like years later after they make the policy, but they probably also trying to win back from those customers who left the platform, the churn customers, but they will not, because they didn't even know the reason they left and didn't want to come back, because that are limitations, and then they have no idea you have made a change. So that's why I'm saying, like, when you think about monetization strategies, you really have to think about the consequences that might happen, particularly when you change the strategy. How would you make sure the users understand? So that's why it's very important to have a well thought out strategy early on.
Yeah, if you think about how, like you said, it becomes very hard for you to change certain things about people's behaviors once they've experienced your products in a certain way, right? So how do you then identify and address some behavioral barriers that just hinders conversions? I mean, from your experience with user psychology, what examples could you perhaps give to us about how we're able to target exactly and it felt good when you had success with the conversion rates?
Yeah, I think a few things, maybe kind of more like theories, I think we should understand. One is don't assume your customers are logical and irrational because they're not. So that's commonly a mistake. That's why I'm talking about like even my some example I gave previously is like we're trying to share all the benefits of the pay feature, and they expect this customer gonna read through all the details and make decision. No, that's wrong. Right? and also we will assume they will make a rational decision. They're like, oh, that makes sense, I'm gonna pay, blah blah blah. No, but most of the time decisions are made because an emotion is triggered. So either you feel lonely or you're scared or whatever the emotion you have, and then at the right moment and then you make a decision. And then you will think like, oh, it's a logical decision. Yeah, because you're trying to use logic to justify this decision. It's not really from the beginning. So in that case, so you have to think about like how can we tap into users' emotion to help them make the decision correctly. That's why one example you probably haven't seen a lot, even for B2B products, they will have really beautiful images, have like their customers smiling, or videos, anything, because they are very attractive. They feel like they make the user think, oh, that can be me, or they make them feel good. So that's very important. So to think about like, you cannot just assume user will follow your steps one by one and read everything you tell them and make decision. That's why even you mentioned your previous experience, like, for the pricing pages, you have too many steps, too many things to read, and they're gonna lose interest. Instead, that's why some products successful, they give you a taste to try it. Maybe you can try this video or design tool very quickly without even creating an account. So because when that's the first time when users evaluate a product, and then they find success, and then they will be more likely to convert a create account. That's the important thing to think about. Another thing to look into is like usually in a product, we call there is 3 moments. Most people know about aha moment, but actually there is 2 other ones. Another one called setup moment, and then another one is called happy moment. So I'm gonna dive into a little bit further. So setup moment means like what necessary information I have to collect from you to be successful. And oftentimes, a lot of companies, they ask you too many questions. Even particularly for dating app, they ask you all kind of like criteria. Yes, it's great for the user to help them to find the right date, but unfortunately, when you ask too many questions, the users you lose their motivations. They don't want to do it anymore. Why don't you let them to see other users first, and then they can refine their criteria? And not mentioning later, we found so many studies suggest actually most users don't care about those details in terms of your height, your weight, because we don't even know what we're looking for, what we like. And then because the dating app unfortunately forces users to select the criteria, and then they made a choice. So a couple of funny stories I heard is like some couple, they got married already, and then when you interview them, they told you, oh, honestly, I lie about my height, because if I put my real height as a man, and then I won't even not show up, to my now wife's profile. So it turns out that suggests very clearly like the wife didn't have that very strict selection in terms of what height to pick. It's just because the app asked her to make decision, and so she did. So that's actually a common problem for dating pool. It's like there is 90% of users chasing the 10%, and then you miss out the rest of the pool, and that can be actually good for you, the right mate for you. So anyway, so that example is like setup moment only ask for necessary information. You probably don't even have to force you to create an account if you don't have to. And then you can always ask them to do that later when they have more motivation enjoying your product. And then aha moment window. But the trick is like you wanted to make user experience the aha moment as soon as possible. So they can quickly, because everyone has a very short attention, like interest. right? So if you take like 3 minutes for you to explain the product, so you probably give up on the way. The third one is habit. That's why a lot of product, the retention suffer is they haven't established habit for the users. How often, I think the study shows like 80% of the apps user download it, use it once and never came back. So that's another example, right? Because you haven't showed the aha moment and haven't helped you establish a habit, so they don't come back. So we have to think about how do you help users to establish a habit so they stay engaged and return.
Speaking about the setup moment, I'm curious about that in particular. So for things like financial products, because I used to work with the financial products, and what I noticed was that we oftentimes had like such a huge drop off within the first 2-3 steps of setting up. And one of my hypotheses in that regard was that people just got very discouraged when they realized that they were going to have to give personal details and things like that. But those information, the things are necessary because it's a financial product. And so you said only ask for necessary information, and that category for something like a product like that, it is necessary, it is important. How do you walk around those kind of scenarios where you're seeing a high drop-off, but then you have to figure out a way to convert those users? What kind of things could be going on in that scenario?
Yeah, I love that story. A few things I look into. So first one is you have to understand the emotion users feel. So do they feel they don't trust your product, or do they feel scared? So a couple examples I want to give here. One is a financial product. They basically is like you ask for information to connect to all your bank accounts and then your credit card, and then they can show you your financial situation and summarize to you. And then when they after launch a product, they notice like the conversion rate is very low. So yeah, a lot of people actually provide information, but they didn't check the result. And then they found it really odd. If you already provide information, why don't you want to see your result? And then they're smart enough, they did an interview to observe user behaviors. Guess what happened? After user connect their account, they cover their eyes. They don't want to know how bad they are in the hot water. They would rather not to know. So that's the fear of your financial, because that's why also depending on culture. Like in the States, normally even friends, you don't talk about your financial situations. You don't talk about your debt, you don't talk about your loans. It's just kind of taboo, right? And then so that as a result, also in school, unfortunately, we don't learn a lot about how to manage your finance. A lot of people don't understand. They pay back paycheck by paycheck, and then they just don't want to know how bad they are. So that's one example. Another one is like the trust. So yes, setup moment is so necessary, like you described. But if you haven't established a trust, they're not going to give you information, right? And then so there are so many ways you can establish trust. Like from a design perspective, I've seen some example is like they will tell you like how many other users have used your product, or like how your product is secure. Let's say some like badge, anything to feel like, oh, this is not a random app. That's why the brand, the trust is important. Like if let's say if Venmo asks you, would you give it? Yes, because everyone uses Venmo. I trust it. I know Venmo's not gonna steal my information, right? So that's why when you have a new product, and then when you ask for information, I think about, have I established a trust yet? And how can I demonstrate to show that trust?
That's really good. Well, thank you so much for that. And yeah, this has been such a great conversation, to be honest. And I was wondering, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with listeners?
4 things I want to share quickly. One is, based on what we discussed. The first one is think about the monetization strategy. It's like a symphony. You shouldn't assign to one person or one team, to work on. That should be a collaboration between sales, marketing, product, finance, at least, to have a comprehensive strategy together. And then that need to align with the user needs and business needs. So second point is like beyond rational, embrace the emotional. So don't treat your customers as rational users, and have to understand their behavior. That's why oftentimes company makes mistakes. They're like, oh, well, look at the data, they do this, and then that's why we should do this. But everyone knows you talk to your customers, but in reality, how many of them do? Like Most of them don't. That's a problem, because when you don't talk to customers, you can only see how they behave. You don't understand why they behave that way. So you cannot make the right decision. And then the third one is segmentations. So don't have one solution fits all. Don't have one monetization fits all. That's another problem for a lot of companies, right? They only have one pricing, and then they only have one plan. Did you think everyone would be okay with it? That's not, right? That's why even big companies like Spotify, they create a tier just for students, because they don't have income, but they also are core power users for the platform. So you have to think about how do you capture value from this particular segment of customers. And then the fourth one is never effect, which means like your goal is not to convert every single person to a paid customer. Your free users can help you, particularly if they can help you to acquire more customers, or maybe make this networking effect more powerful for dating, for social app. So I just think about that too. Even let's say for a lot of B2B products, they offer for free, but the good thing is, like Figma, how successful it was, why they compete and then win the competition, because at that time, most of the B2B products for design, you have to pay. And then for a company to make decisions like, oh, do we really want my sales, do we want my product manager to all have different seats? Because it's going to cost me so much money to buy that many seats for them. But Figma is like, no, I only charge for the designer, for the editor. Everyone else, I don't charge them. What happened? Everyone use it. But this free user really help, because everyone's like, oh, there's more user use it, and of course they're well adapted. So think about too, like when you charge users, you might not necessarily charge everyone. Can be maybe only editor, only certain role based on use case, and then give some for free users. Let them to stay as the free users. That can help you with your business. So yeah, the 4 things I want to share.
Amazing. Really amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Shawn. So now we've come to the final part, which is my favorite part, lightning round questions. All right, so we're going to go as rapidly as possible. First one is, what are the top 3 products that you use daily and you love?
I definitely use ChatGPT a lot. Not helping with everything. That's my order. I use ChatGPT, and then I use Grammarly. So you probably heard of that. Yeah, so I love it too. So that can help me to really fix all the problems and then structure better. So these 2 products I use daily. And the third one is Alexa, because can play music, can play podcasts. Like you guys, I subscribe to your podcast. So I oftentimes when I eat by myself, I listen to the podcast, and then I can ask all the questions. I love that very much, because think about old days, if you like wonder something and then you end up not looking it up, and then you couldn't find the answer. But now it's like one sentence away, and you can get the answer. So you can become smarter and get more information every day. So I love this.
All right. What profession will you be if not your current job?
Oh, a wildlife biologist. Because think about the Planet Earth documentaries. Right? Like imagine you like in the show and then just traveling in a different part of the world. It's like, it's not just, it's not like cities, it's all this like remote areas. And then you get to like observe and then like live, with this wildlife. So I think that's very fascinating. Not mention like, I mentioned my hobbies, you can like scuba dive, and then you can ski, and then so rock climb, and then you can do the things to reach a destination and then to see the
That sounds dreamy, seriously.
Yeah, so thank you so much, guys, for listening to this episode. It was fun talking to Shawn, and you can reach out to Shawn on LinkedIn. We'll add his bio, his social link to the show notes, and all the other references that he had mentioned. And we hope to have you once more, maybe later in the future, Shawn, if you'd love to join us back. Thanks so much,
it's been
Shawn.
a really great session with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation very much.
Yeah. All right. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.